Hey friends, welcome back to another tutorial, and today we are making this guy. That's right, this is the long-awaited Sword and Shield tutorial. It's, in my opinion, one of my best designs, and I'm really excited to bring it to y'all. So, let's get to it. So, before we get into folding, what do you need for this tutorial? So, what you can see here is the paper I'm going to use. This is a square of double tissue, which is the paper I recommend for this model. And this paper is a little bit under 50 centimeters. It's like 48 centimeters. And it's the same size I used for this fold. This is like the best size for this model. If you go any smaller, it gets a lot harder. And if you use a paper that's too large, the model gets a little floppy. So this is what I recommend, around 50 centimeters and with double tissue, which is relatively thin. You don't want to use thick paper. Don't use printer paper. Don't use tissue foil. Double tissue, it's pretty easy to come by. Try that. Now, this model is relatively efficient. So if you use a slightly thicker paper, it's okay, or a slightly smaller paper. I've had a few pretty good folds from 35 centimeters, but this is what I recommend. Now, for this tutorial, the knowledge that you're going to need to be able to fold this model is just basic crease pattern knowledge. So if you have absolutely no experience with crease patterns, I recommend you watch my crease pattern class, at least the first few episodes, so you can get familiar with some of the terms I'm going to be using during this tutorial. There's going to be, some pre-creasing, some Elias stretches that we'll go through, and it won't really make sense unless you know how to do those already. This is a complex model. It's not super difficult if you have experience, but if this is your first time doing box pleating, you might find it a little bit difficult. But I'll link in the description a ton of videos as prerequisites if you want to fold this. So go check that out. Don't feel the need to rush into folding this model if it seems too hard. You can watch some of those other videos and practice, and this should be not too bad. So with that said, I think we can start folding. And this is the crease pattern for the Sword and Shield. So on the left, you can see that all the creases are filled out, but on the right is the crease pattern of just the pre-creases. So this model is based on a 24 by 24 grid, which we'll get to folding next. But knowing that, you can see that on the right side, it's not too much to pre-crease. You don't have to do all the crazy stuff on the left. Just the bare minimum is going to be on the right. Now, this will be posted on my website, which there's a link in the description. So refer to that crease pattern, and you'll be good to go. All right, so as we begin folding, I am going to ask you guys to make a 24 by 24 grid. You should be able to do this. I have a tutorial on how to make grids, so I'll link that in the description. But if you can't do this yet, then I don't recommend that you try this tutorial. It's going to be a little bit too crazy. If you have your 24 by 24 grid, I printed out the crease pattern so I can show you what I am folding. You don't really need this. You can just follow along, but I recommend you at least have the photo, somewhere you can look and you can double check. And then lastly, if you happen to be using paper that has two colors on each side, well, first, I don't recommend that. I recommend you use a single color paper. But in that case, then the color that is on top when your edge-most fold is mountain will be the color of the, Sword and Shieldman mostly. And I think there's an unintentional color change in the legs. So that's why I just recommend using a one-colored paper, but that's just a little heads up. So let's get started. So for the first part, you might see I have this diagonal line going through. You can just ignore that. But for the most part, I will probably be using this top edge as like the sword and head area, and I'll be referring to the bottom edge as the legs. Now, keeping track of the orientation is going to help you a lot. So just keep that in mind, and we're going to pre-crease the bottom first. So as you can see, the legs, which that's what this is. These are the legs. There, it's whole unit. So we're just going to copy this first. So it kind of helps set the scene. It's not too difficult. We're going to start in a corner, and it's going to go up 2, 4, 6, 7. So we're going to fold up 7 grid units like that. And if you are not familiar with how to do this, well, we're just simply, folding the corner. Starting like that. And then because I folded the grid, I am now using it to count. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, 7. And I'm going to double check that. Make sure we're good. So that's 7 grid units. And I want you to get familiar with counting grid units and pre-creasing like that. That's another, skill you're going to need for this model and pre-creasing in general. But it's pretty easy. You just got to keep track of your creases. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we have a little zigzag right here that makes a V of 1 unit down, 1 unit up. So I'm going to replicate that here. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to make sure I find the correct starting point. And I'm using my hand underneath the paper and my fingernail to kind of help pinch this crease into place like that. Now, some people don't like to pre-crease with this method. So if you just want to fold it normally, you can do that too. But I find this way to be a little bit faster, as well as I don't have to move the paper too much. Now, you notice I am folding these all as mountain fold. It doesn't really matter what they are, but I find it just easier and faster if I just do everything in mountain fold. The way the collapse will be, the creases will automatically align. Okay, so we have that done. The next thing to do is 3 units down like this. And as you can see, we're already halfway through the legs, which will just repeat on the other side. It's pretty easy. All right, so now that I'm at the center, I'm just going to actually mirror it. So now we do 3 up. And this is kind of like a repeat on the other side step. All right, so we go back up 3, and I can just refer to what I've already done to copy it, right? So now I do the zigzag down. And then the 1 unit up, make the V. And you can actually see that because I had this diagonal folded already, I don't really need to add that crease, but just so that it makes it a little bit easier, I'm just going to flip the crease to a mountain on the tip. I don't need to do the whole thing. It's just so that the paper will obey me a little bit easier. All right, so we have that done. Now this is where I'm going to rotate the paper and change our perspective so that we can pre-crease the other side, right? So see how I kept my crease pattern in line. So now up top is where the legs are. On the bottom is where the arms and head are. And we're going to start with the sword, which is here. We're going to start here just because it's easy to keep track. Starting from the corner. Again, I kind of already have this pre-creased, but I'm going to act like I don't. And so we're going to start with 4 units from the corner, like this. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4. And then now we're going up 3 into the right. So that's 1, 2, 3. Like this. Next up, we have 3 to the left. Like that, 3 to the left. Now we have 2 that goes down. So you see this is 1, 2. And make sure you count correctly so that you don't make mistakes here. All right, next one, we're going up and to the left 4 units. Make sure you keep track, right? It was from here. You know, and sometimes people will want to draw these creases in so they can keep track of folding. This is normally if you're new to this style of pre-creasing. And using a pencil is okay. Generally, after you fold a bunch, it kind of fades. But I recommend you try to practice without, just because it's a good skill to learn. Awareness of the paper and where your creases are will actually help you in a lot of other types of origami. All right, so we've gotten to 4 to the left. Now we do up 1 to the right and then up 1 to the left. So from here, up 1 to the right and up 1 to the left. Like that. Next, we have down left to the 3. Down and left 3. Like that. And now we have a bunch of 1 units going down. And these form little points. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And so we're just going to do this carefully and make sure we don't accidentally do too many. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now our next one is down and left. And you can see actually this extends all the way to the edge, which would be 4. So I'm just going to do that just because this might as well, right? Even though it intersects a different crease, you can just do 4 to the edge. It's very easy to keep track of. And that allows us to actually start our other side. Now it's not exactly mirrored, but this up to here will be. So we can start down here and fold up to the left 2, which will cross and make an X with the crease we just made. Right, you see that? And then we're just going to repeat these zigzags and just use the creases we've previously made as reference. Now, I think if I remember correctly, there should be 7 of them. But it's kind of okay. We just look at the other side. As long as our first side is correct, we match the second side to the first, that should be correct as well. And you can see, especially here, my pre-creasing technique very much speeds this process up. Just by using my fingernail from underneath the paper to help guide these creases into place. You can also notice I'm not creasing them very hard. It's just enough so that it'll fold. Looks like we got one more. Like that. All right, next we have right here, so it's up and 3 to the left. We are very close to being done with pre-creasing. Just like this. All right, just a few more. Our next one is down and left 4. Right, now we have some more zigzags. This time it's just 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of them back and forth here. It's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what we're working on here is the shield hand. So next up we have what makes up the shield, and it's a sequence of 2, 2, 2. So we're going to go 2 down to the bottom right, 2 to the bottom left, and 2 up to the left. I think we can do all those at once. So 2 to the bottom right, 2 to the bottom left, and 2 up to the left. Just like that, and we are done with our pre-creasing. So I'm going to put the crease pattern back on the paper. Once again, rotate it 180 degrees so that we are back in the correct orientation where the head is towards the top and the bottom is the legs. So hopefully that made sense, and hopefully this isn't too hard. This should be the easy part. And that was the pre-creasing. Now we can go and get to the collapse. And it's time for the collapse, which is the fun part, right? So the first thing we're going to do is collapse this into basically a stick, a really long stick, and we're going to squeeze it in this direction. So again, this is the legs, that's the head. So I'm going to just rotate 90 degrees, and you can see how we have all these grid folds already. And I'm just going to mountain valley fold across all of them in this orientation until it's one large folded stick. And here we have it folded in a stick. I'm going to rotate it back this direction, and don't forget our current orientation is legs on the bottom. So you can just double check that for yourself. If you look at the bottom, you can see your pre-creases in the corner. And this is what we are going to start to collapse first. So before we collapse, I am actually going to want to find the very center amongst these layers. And the way to do that is also to just find our pre-crease. So I found it right here, right? We have this point, which is this one right here. Right, do you see that? Our crease right here. Great, so now we know we are in the center of the layers. And that way we are going to collapse these one at a time. So let's get started with that. I am going to start to collapse by now folding along the other direction of grid lines. So starting from the bottom here, I'm going to start on the horizontal towards the corner, and you can see how if I follow our pre-crease up, just using our grid, right now it's turning into a flap. And I can actually do this across the whole model for the first few layers. But just to make it a little easier, I'm going to start with this side and just get a good ways up. This is about 4 layers through. Now I can open it this way a little bit and do the same thing on the other side. Now you don't want to unfold it, all the way flat. I'm still letting the layers, have some tension so that it's very easy to recollapse back into that stick. But very simply, just following the lines. And this is what I would call a giant Elias stretch. and we're going to go up to here, and then I'll show you what to do once we hit the next section. So we go like that, and I just want to get this little corner. Don't worry about the middle yet, just try to get it collapsed to the corners like this, just so it has some memory. And now I'm going to collapse the top back into the stick with our middle layers open. So now it closes like this, right? So it's just back to the stick. We have this here. Our front over here isn't quite folding flat yet, but it's about to. And the way to resolve that here is if I grab these, underneath these layers is actually our pre-crease. We can actually see how it follows right there. And we can just fold through the layers like this. So it's just a 45 degree like this on both sides. And you'll feel it underneath this, right? Like, I'm not looking too carefully because I can feel the crease underneath, how it naturally wants to close like that. And as you can see, it lets us close all the way up until this point where we have these 1 units like this. And this is why it's a little easier if you've done this as mountain fold, because this is going to form a 1 unit flap like this. And make sure it collapses with this sticking out like that. And that is one side collapsed. We're going to flip this over and we're going to do the same thing on the other side, right? So just recollapse up to here. And then we have this point that's going to turn into a flap. Again, just following all the creases we've had before. Like that. Now we can close both sides together. And we have something like this. And, you know, I can fold this flap up and you can see we have like this 3 unit flap that ends in a point. Now we're going to do one thing before we continue with this point. Remember how we folded this triangle basically, and it folded through some of these layers? I'm going to want to open up some of these layers. We're unwrapping them a little bit. So I'm just rotating the paper and opening up a lot of the model so I can very gently unwrap the paper, right? Like this. And as you can see, if I just unwrap one layer, I have some new creases that have formed from where we previously had. And I'm just going to resolve this one and then I'll show you a little bit closer so you can see. And, you know, the thing with double tissue, sometimes reversing creases doesn't go as nicely as you'd want it to. So this one's giving a little bit of a problem, but once I resolve it there, now, okay, so it forms a new point, right? And now we have 2 points here because I unwrapped one layer. And now we want to unwrap another layer. So there's one more layer to unwrap, and it's the same kind of process. Just going to very gently open some of the model, unwrap this layer, and you can see here, right, these extra creases, they'll all be mountain, right? So even if it's not currently mountain, you can fold it as mountain, and things will start to click into place. Like this. And at the very last layer, it will fold into a tip still. Now, to get it back together, you just want to refold the stick. That's just the easiest way to get things to fold nicely. So I have the stick, and then now I am going to fold the rest of it flat. And what we're left with is that same flat, but now we have 3 points on the top like this. All right, and now we can continue. Now the next step, it's a little bit different of a step. And we're only going to do this on one side. So very quickly, I'm just going to flip the model over so that our legs are pointing towards the top. Again, this is the very center. We have our 3 points like this. And what I'm going to do is only on this side, which happens to be the left side, I'm going to fold just one layer. So this is from the left over to the right side like this. And when it gets towards this tip here, you'll notice that we're going to need to do a spread sink or spread squash right here. Now, it doesn't have to be perfectly clean, but try to make it as clean as possible, just because why not? Just like this. And this acts as an axis shift, like that. So now, this set of layers, if I flip it back over here, these set of layers are in line with where our face will be. So if I show the crease pattern, right, we used to have it folded to the center, but now we've moved one over so that we see this face. So what you see in this section here is right here on the crease pattern, and that's going to help us collapse the top. All right, so we're done with the bottom for now, and we're going to start collapsing the top. I'm going to collapse the sword hand first. I think just getting that out of the way is kind of nice. And then the shield hand will be super easy. So let's rotate it. Our sword hand is on this side. Now, in this case, we are going to do something similar to the legs, but instead of having to fold these grid lines, right, these ones at the top, we don't have to go all the way through the model anymore, right? You can just fold it like this. Very similar to the same thing in the corner. But remember where we have this, where the face is going to be? You can actually see a pre-crease right here. And this will terminate this horizontal crease right here. So this might be a little bit hard to see the crease right here, but it's going to be actually translating into this pre-crease here. So you can see how it's pushing. And what I like to do with the other side is I just grab all the layers on the other side. And you can see we're going up 1 layer, 2 layer. And I'm just going to mountain fold that out of the way. So when I mountain fold that out of the way, I can fully start creasing that and just keep going along for the sword hand. Now, if that confuses you a little bit, I'm just going to flip the paper over really quick to show you what I mean. All right, so this is the other side where all the layers are together. And again, I'm just mountain folding these together just to keep them out of the way. And this will allow me to just collapse the arm. So I've now isolated just this section to collapse. And basically we just do the same thing as the legs. Right now we're following the sword. And you just want to keep track of where your pre-creases are. So we have 4 units, which was from our sword. And then right, it goes out this side, and we can see that here. And to do that, we just keep folding those horizontal grid lines. Right? And it's still just following the creases up to here. And everything is kind of folding itself together quite nicely. Now you might be wondering, all right, boys, now what happens on this other side? Well, you can see our pre-creases with all these zigzags, right? Each one of these zigzags will make a mountain fold that runs across like this. And it'll be similar to how we mountain folded the layers on the other side, right? So I'm folding all these layers from the other side. and it makes a 1 unit flap like this. And that lets it hold together. And that's going to happen along each one of these zigzags we see. So here's the next one. Like this. Then makes a mountain fold. And I'm using my other finger to hold all the layers together on the other side. Make this a little cleaner. Just like that. And we just have a few more, but I think we have to collapse more of the arm first. So we're going to keep going. We're reaching this section right here. So it kind of goes up and down. This will be a flap that pushes upwards. So I'll show you. This collapses down like this. And like that. And then now it goes back upward, and you can see our pre-crease here. So again, just try to allow it to collapse itself. Now it goes back down this way. Like that. All right, so you just go one at a time. And it's kind of like just tracing all the pre-creases we've done until we run into more that we can do. So now I can do this next 1 unit flap over here. Just like that. And we just have a little bit left. Now this section gets a little bit tricky just because there's a lot going on at once. So I am getting to the last zigzag. So let's get the last zigzag out of the way. And then this thing right here is where it gets a little bit strange. So here we have our last zigzag. Let's fold that. The mountain fold. And now you can see how we have all these, right, 1 unit flaps. All right, here we are. Now we can see our pre-creases. It goes down, up to the right, and then up to the left, which is this section over here. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a 1 unit flap that sticks out in this quadrant. So as I'm collapsing, if I fold here, you see how now it's pushing a 1 unit flap out the back. And that's where a lot of people get tripped up a little bit. But once it's collapsed, it'll kind of stay on its own. We can fold everything together. And it kind of folds down flat on this side very nicely. See that? Now we just have the other side to do. And it's basically the same thing, but a little bit easier because we already have all these mountain folds in place. So when we go to fold the grid, there's kind of benchmarks for how the model will be collapsed because the general structures are already there. So I'm just going to very gently unfold only the layers on this other side. Like this. Just open up so I can see the creases. Let's start from the top again. Just mountain fold. And this time we're not going to the corner. We just go through to the edge. And I'm going to do a valley fold like this. And you can see this is where the previous crease is. Like that, which is right here. And then we can follow the next one down right here with the next horizontal grid crease. Right. And now we see all the zigzag parts, which we can just keep on going. And what I'm actually going to do on the right side, I'm going to completely ignore all of the creases for now. This whole area on the right, I'm just going to ignore them and let the horizontal creases go out to the edge, and we'll fix them later It'll be easier once we solve the zigzags on the center area. Right. So here's one zigzag. And then it just kind of goes to the next one pretty freely. Here's the next zigzag. And, you know, I'm just taking my time. Don't feel the need to rush. Just try to get all the folds along the pre-creases we made very gently. Not sure if you can tell in the video, but I'm holding and maneuvering and pushing the creases very, very gently. A lot of times I'm reaching underneath the layers to help poke some of the paper through, like that. That way everything can stay pretty precise. We got one more of these zigzags. Just like that. Sometimes the layer on the other side gets a little bit messy when we've been moving the other side a lot. So I'm just fixing it up a little bit. But now we can see we have this center area pretty good. All these 1 unit flaps. We just need to finish the side towards the edge over here. And it's going to be the same thing as the sword. We're just now following the pre-creases from this side. So it goes down like this. And then it starts to go back up. I keep following it up. Right? Like this. Till here where it goes left a bit, which now means I can refold the vertical grid lines like this, and we see these zigzags. They nicely push into little flaps like this. That's 1, 2. We have a third one that goes a little bit deeper in this section. And we're really close to the top now, which is where it's going to finally collapse. So it goes this way and then it goes up to the top. And you can see up to the top, we get another flap here with the layers collapsed. And very lastly, it collapses out to the side like this. And this little section will become our shield. And I'm just going to fold everything back nicely, and it should lay flat. Everything should be collapsed pretty nicely now. Like this in our arms. I'm just going to have them folded down to the side or down behind the model. And now the whole thing can fit on screen like this. Just like that. And so that is the collapse based on what we have on the crease pattern. Next, we're going to fold it into, you know, what looks a little bit more like a knight. And there are some more structures we need to fold before we shape. So we're going to finish up all the rest of those collapse and folding portions. And that will be the first part of the tutorial. Right. So let's continue folding. We're going to be working on some of the details now that it's collapsed from the crease pattern. So that's stuff that includes like the fingers, some of the hand, as well as some level shifters for the legs. The other thing we're going to do, which we'll start with, is actually how the spine works. You know, when I see people fold from the crease pattern, and I explain that it's like a stick, you know, sometimes people don't understand what's going on. So let me show you really quick. Basically, we are going to be folding a rabbit ear on this hinge right here. So there's gonna be 2 valley folds and then a valley fold through the middle. And so I like to just pre-crease that a little bit first. I'm gonna flip our model over and just make a fold like this through all these layers into torso. We're going to do that on both sides. Right, and so if we now fold that as a rabbit ear, go to the front, you can see how it pushes our torso in like this, right? But we also need to do that above here. So what's going to happen over here is it's actually going to come from the neck. So this whole area is going to be folded in half like this as in a rabbit ear. And then the neck is going to be the exit of a rabbit ear. So here's our face flaps and our helmet flaps. So underneath that hinge, we're going to kind of do the same thing where we fold that crease. So I'm just folding through the layers here like this. And same thing on the other side. I know there might be quite a few layers here. You just want to make sure that you don't interrupt where this flap can fold down. So if it's not like perfectly to the corner, it's okay, but you can try. And then once those are done, right, now we can fold this all together, and our neck becomes like this, and just reinforce that rabbit ear like this. And while we're at it, what I like to do with this rabbit ear is actually make a like mountain fold in half. So like if you can imagine this triangle, and like a little mountain fold like this, right? That will help it stay put when you do it on both sides. So I'm gonna do it on the other side too. And it's not exactly like a full mountain fold, but you can see how I'm using my fingers and kind of pressing against it, and it creates like a little mountain fold impression right there, right? And that way it kind of locks the neck together so that when we get the shaping, it's going to be okay. And then I do the same thing on the hips over here, and this will actually help us with posing our hips because it'll give it some flexibility. So I'm just doing some valley fold on that side, and then on this side, right? And that kind of keeps the rabbit ear in place, as well as now we can swivel our hips, and you know, it's very flexible now. And you'll notice that by doing this, we've shortened the torso to 2 units, which is good because that is how our torso armor will cover up the chest area of our model, like that. And so, yeah, that's how the body works. It's a little bit confusing sometimes, but there you go. All right, next thing we can do is for the legs. So for the legs, I'm going to flip the model around like this, and I'm going to take the outermost layer here and open it. So this is from the inside, like the layer in between the legs, right? Make sure you're opening the right layer, opening up the layer like this. And to make it fold flat, I'm going to have to squash fold this corner down like this. Now that it's squash folded down, let's valley fold it up where we're valley folding between these 2 corners that we just formed. Like that. And now to get the rest of this to lay flat, as you can kind of see, we're naturally getting the swivel fold on this 1 unit flap here. But that is how it translates out. So just complete the swivel fold. Should feel kind of natural. And then basically the end of the swivel fold is this mountain fold that goes 45 degrees this way. And we'll have a wider leg. Now we're going to do one more layer to even out the thickness. And so once again, from the inside, I'm now valley folding it open again. And the swivel fold kind of still follows the same thing going on here. But this time, you can see we have the structure that we need to spread sink or spread squash down to let it lie flat. This one, you know, is going to be seen on the leg armor. So try to be a little careful, you know, make it look good and even. That way, when we shape our leg armor, it looks pretty nice. Just like this. And now that it's squash folded, we're actually going to pull out this corner that's underneath this layer. And so to do that, I like to pinch these layers together and very gently unsync the corner there. And once it's unsynced, I just look for where the pre-crease lines were and invert the creases. And that allows that corner to pop out. And we can refold this crease here. Like that. And then finally, I'm just going to valley fold this corner forward. You know, this detail, this will just kind of be part of the foot. So not super important. But what is important is this next one is we're also going to pull this out like this. So kind of the same way, but this one's a little bit easier. Open it up like that. And the reason for this one is we're going to unwrap one more layer and do the same kind of squash fold. So open this, that's one more layer. And squash fold. Just like this. And then to finish it off, I'm just going to take this middle flap right here and fold it down. So it looks like we have some kites stacked on top of each other like this. And that is our leg. So if we take a look at the original model, I have the leg armor a little bit different. And this next part is a bit more difficult. So if you want to just skip this part and leave the leg like this, the only difference is that you'll have a little bit more like lines running through the legs when we're shaping it. But if you want to do it exactly like how I did it over here, this is what you're going to do. It's not too bad. It's just like a little bit extra. So I am going to take this corner and unsync it, kind of like what we did before. So I'm just going to pull that out. All right, so now we have another, kite shape. And then we are basically going to be stretching this flap up into the next one. And to do that, you have to hold onto the upper tip over here and then hold the bottom below this middle tip and just pull very gently so it starts to open. Don't pull too hard. And then once it's open, we're going to make a new mountain fold from this corner to this corner by reaching underneath the layer. I'm going to use my finger to poke, and this will help stretch it. So I'm connecting this corner to this corner with a mountain fold. And what will happen is once you make that mountain fold, there's going to be a natural bisector valley fold that wants to fold. So you can start on that too. And basically that will line the edges up on that side. And then you're going to do the same thing on this side. Use my finger underneath the layer to make a new mountain fold from the corner to the corner. And then same thing, a new valley fold should want to form automatically, which will allow the edges to line up like this. And then once we get to the top of the tip, this tip has now actually stretched, so it's a little bit taller. And you can pinch this together. You can see we now have a new hinge. And this stretches farther down just by a little bit. And so if we look at our model over here, basically this tip is the armor that sits a little bit above the knee right there. And yeah, it's just a very small detail, but that in case you wanted to fold that, that's how you would do it. And now all we're going to do is repeat the same thing on the other leg. So I'm just going to skip through that. So go ahead and finish that for your fold. And we'll come right back. All right, so we are done with the legs. Next, we are going to work on the torso. So that is right here. And I think there's like an easy way to do this as well as a hard way. So the easy way would literally just be to, valley fold this down and then valley fold this corner down like this. Well, I guess this is the same for both methods. But as you can see at the bottom of this tip, we have like another one dropped down like that with some points sticking out. And that is the hard part. So you can either just kind of push this down a little bit and let whatever happens in here happen as kind of like a mini pleat. Or you can do the method that I'm about to show. But I will warn you, it's a little bit weird to understand. Not necessarily hard, just weird to understand. So I'll show it, but if you can't get it, no worries. Just try to make it look okay. And it's just a small detail, right? So let's get to it. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is let's valley fold. Actually, let's just get this tip out of the way. We're going to valley fold the middle one up. And so now we just have the bottom one over here. And you can see I kind of already tested some of the pre-creases just to remember how I actually did this. But under this layer, we can grab the layer on the right and valley fold down like this, right? See how we're making a valley fold 45 degree? And that just takes this corner to the inside like that. And then what we're going to want to do is valley fold back. So we get this little, almost like a water bomb base in the middle, just like this. And this is just a pre-crease. So we're going to unfold that and do it on the other side as well. Right, so we're valley folding down, and then we make a little swivel here. Just to pre-crease for now. Right, so now we're going to unfold that, and then make sure this bottommost tip is folded down. Next, we are going to want to fold a valley fold from this line or this corner to this corner, and those corners were made from the pre-crease we just made, and it kind of is just folding to the center, but you only want to pre-crease along here. You don't need the rest. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Like that. So now we have these pre-creases here. And this is where the little tricky collapse begins. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to valley fold this second tip kind of down for a little bit because we're going to need to open up some layers to do this. I'm going to hold it. Let's get this focused here. I'm going to open the layer a little bit and start by folding mountain folds along this long diagonal line at the bottom. And you can see that it's going to connect here and here as both mountain folds. Then there's going to be a valley fold along this line. And this is just a grid line that we've had before. Right? And then what's going to happen is a new mountain fold is going to fold right along here. And it's going to translate out to the tip. And then it's going to mountain fold on this other line that we pre-creased over here. And so I'm actually just going to help reinforce that mountain fold there. And lastly, we have a mountain fold that's going to form basically from this corner to this corner. And I'm kind of just like pre-setting all these creases in action on one side. And I'm going to flip it around and set them up on the other side. That way the collapse can just be nice and smooth and clean all together. So once again, these pre-creases we've did before. Mountain fold. Mountain fold. Then fold on this crease here. And then another mountain fold will pop up over there kind of naturally. I push this in. Now it folds on the inside. Then lastly, a new mountain fold will form right here, right? And once those are in place, I'm going to push in from both sides to keep all the creases in the same direction and start to let it fold down. And if I start from this square and just slowly crease, you can see the kind of structure that's forming. And you just want to make sure that everything is in line and as clean as possible. It might get a little bit messy towards the bottom here like mine is, in which case you're just going to want to gently correct some of the creases as you finish up this collapse. Like that. There we go. Now that's nice and clean. I can close this up. And there we have this structure. Now, obviously, it's not exactly the same as this one yet. All you really have to do is pleat it upwards and then spread out the little tips. So what I'm going to do is open that tip out a little bit out of the way. I'm going to valley fold along the hinge and then mountain fold back down. It's like about, and I guess this one you can eyeball. It's like about a third, but it's just so that, you know, tip kind of stretches out a little bit past. And I would just use the picture of my fold as reference to crease that. And then you can notice that this point is already starting to spread out a little bit. So you can just encourage that by letting it swivel down a little bit more. And just match both sides. So this other tip is still stuck in there, but I'm going to grab and swivel it out just to match the other side. Like that. Then crease down those creases. And that's how we get that detail over there. And it'll be ready for our wet shaping in the next video. So I'm going to fold this tip back down. And we are done with the torso armor. I know that was kind of a lot, but hey, it looks cool, right? All right, so that's the torso done. Next up, we have fingers. Let's go ahead and do the fingers on this side with the sword first, just because they are a little bit easier to understand, a little bit more normal. Now, we didn't pre-crease them, right? Because we can just pre-crease them all at once now, which is great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open some of these layers and find the inside here, right, where I can see basically the diagonal creases on both sides, and that will be the like center of the hand. And by doing that, I can actually like open this outwards and squash fold all these layers down like this, and they're gonna match that diagonal fold. And this is essentially our pre-crease, right? So now if I unfold this, and you want to crease that like fairly well, you know, you don't have to go crazy, but crease that fairly well. But from here, we're now just going to open the layers. So very carefully unwrap the layer like this, right? So we see our diagonals, and then we can see where we just pre-creased right here. And we can now fold this into a point with mountain folds like this. Right, you see how that works? And then it goes back together. And we do this for each layer. So this was the first layer, right? Now I can do the same thing. I can unwrap the next one. And when I unwrap these, normally what I do actually is just open a lot of the layers, just so I don't accidentally rip anything. I'm just very careful and open up most of the layers all at once. You know, you can do this sequentially, kind of like what I'm showing, but if you want to just open up all the layers and then recollapse it without, you know, unfolding too much, then you're okay. So we've got a second finger So 1, 2, and we have, just a few more, and you just keep going. It gets easier and easier towards the end. So like here, I'm just popping up all of them at once. You can see there's just all these creases that form little diamonds. And you just want to convert all of those pre-creases into mountain folds, and it should naturally collapse back pretty easily. So right now I'm just like worrying about correcting the creases into mountain folds. And then at the very edge as well. And then once they're all mountain folds, you can start to recollapse them all together like this, and then just clean up the creases if any of them get stuck, like mine's getting a little bit stuck here. Trying to make it a little bit nicer. Just very gently adjust paper like that. The cleaner the fingers are, the easier they'll be to shape. All right, and then once they're all together, we can reclose the hand and the sword together like this. And oops, I unwrap the tip of the sword a little bit. There we go. And with that, we are done with the fingers. At least the finger claps. We'll get to the rest of the shaping later. I think we'll just keep the base of it done now. There, I gotta fix my sword. All right. I guess the last thing we can do for now maybe is swivel the sword into place. So basically, I'm holding the fingers between my middle and index finger, and then I'm holding the sword between my index finger and thumb. And I'm holding the arm with my index finger and middle finger like this, and using my thumb to just swivel the sword into the hand like this. Just gives it a swivel 90 degrees like that. And very simply, right, that's the start of the sword hand. All right, so next up, we're going to do the fingers on the other hand. These ones are harder to do a little bit, but I think it's a better hand to shape. So let's get to this one. All right, so let's start on these fingers. And to pre-crease them, it's very similar to what we did before, right? We're finding the center of the arm flap and then opening it so that we can squash fold as our pre-crease. Now, the difference is that there's 3 of them and only 1 layer to unwrap. So in some sense, it's easier to pre-crease and unwrap. But you'll see that once we try to unwrap them, we kind of had to do them all at once, which is okay. It's not too terrible. It's just a little confusing. All right, so we have that squash fold like this. All right. Those are now pre-creased. So we have to unwrap. And since we're unwrapping all 3 at once, we have to open up a little bit more of the paper. So don't be afraid to, open up quite a bit of the arm. That way you don't accidentally rip your paper. All right, so I'm pushing all of them out at once. And now in order to recollapse it, we can do it in a few steps, so it's not super hard. Let's start from the bottom here, right? We can see all of our diamonds now that are pre-creased. And I'm just going to fold the, creases along the first or the inner layer. I'm going to completely ignore the outer layer over here for now. And that way I can actually get it to collapse a little bit. Otherwise, the paper kind of goes into itself, which will make it really confusing. So it's just along the row, like the inside row here. Right. And so by doing that, we can actually collapse a lot of it back down. And what happens is that we're left with this, you know, quadrilateral that's uncollapsed, which makes it easy because all we have to do now to collapse this is to do a little reverse fold along the pre-creases like this. And now all the diamonds are collapsed. So in total of the flaps, we have these two flaps that can fold forward, and then you're left with this like little point thing over here, which is kind of weird. But for now, let's actually just valley fold them down like this because we have some more things to work on. In this orientation, we have two, I guess, pyramids, right? We have a little triangle here. We have one over here with the four edges. And what you're going to want to do is valley fold the tip to the center here. And this is a pre-crease. So I'm folding the tip like that. Creasing it pretty good. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side over here. For the other one. Pre-crease it pretty good. Right? Unfold. And you might expect it. An open sink. So let's go ahead and do the open sink fold. Now, because it's facing like into the layer of the paper, you can just take your time on this. I kind of just make sure every crease is a mountain fold. Like that. And then it lets me fold it pretty easily. Right, so that's one sink fold. Now let's do the other one. Kind of same thing. I just open it up. Make sure all the pre-creases are mountain fold. Like that. And then push it back in for our sink fold. And those sink folds are done. Now these flaps along the bottom, let's valley fold them all to the top. So we have all the points folded pointing towards the edge. And now we're going to do some more pre-creasing for this side of the arm. First being just a pretty simple valley fold along the bisector. Right? Like this. Now, the next one is kind of special. We don't really need to pre-crease this. We can just do a spread sink / spread squash instead of pre-creasing it, because this one doesn't need to open sink. We can just get it out of the way by doing the squash fold and then closing it back up. Right? Now, for the next two, we're going to have to fold pre-crease for the bisector like this. Like that. And then one more. Like that. And then once again, this next one we can fold as a spread sink. However, you'll notice you can't spread sink this one quite like the others because there is a hinge in the way. So what you're going to have to do is make it a little bit angled, which is okay. So basically it's going to stop at where the hinge is, and then on this side it's going to go a little bit more past. And this is more of a Pythagorean spread sink. And valley fold that back up, which will kind of make a new crease. All right, and then for the last one, don't forget we need this folded up. And you're going to just pre-crease the bisector like the others. that. All right. So now that we have those pre-creased, we are going to open sync them. So we have 4 open syncs to do. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. And these are pretty standard open syncs, so I don't think I have to explain this too much. If you made it through the other ones, you should be able to make it through these, but it's just an open sync fold. It's like this, right? And the next one, now I guess the one tricky thing about some of these open sync folds is you have these other layers in the way from our other side of the triangle. So just be aware that you need, like I have my fingers pushing them out of the way and very much on the other side of the paper, so that it gives me some access to actually get the sync fold done in a clean manner, like that. And then if my other areas have gotten undone a little bit, I just put them back before folding down. All right, so now we've got 2 sync folds done. We got 2 more. Got one over here. And now we just have 1 more on this edge. This edge one should be probably the easiest one. There we go. And that is the start of the fingers. Now, we're not done with these yet. As you can see, right, we have like a finger facing the other direction, and then it's really wide over here. So this is where the fingers get a little bit tricky. I'm probably going to hold a little closer to the camera and then just pay attention to how this works. Now, I've also showed these fingers in the Dragon Plate Armor Assassin tutorial. So if it doesn't make sense here, maybe check that other tutorial because they're almost the same. They're like 95% the same. And I might have explained it a little bit better in that video. But let's get to it. So to start, I am holding the finger that's facing, the legs. I'm opening the layer a little bit here. And we have the results from our sync fold. And what I want to do is just valley fold along this area. And what's going to happen is it's going to open up this area from the sync fold. So it's like this, right? And that is going to allow us to then continue to put the fingers in this alignment. Now, the disadvantage of what's going to happen is this flap facing the bottom is actually going to swivel up around 90 degrees like this. So like that. It's not fully there yet because we need to do the rest of it. But that's basically to start for the first set of fingers. And then, right, now we're going to open. I'm valley folding up, kind of the same thing, except this middle finger, finger in the middle is now trapped between these layers, but it's going to continue on the swivel just for a little bit. And you can see now our flap here is starting to very much face downwards. Then we can go to the next finger, and this is going to be very similar. Now it's very open. So we're going to valley fold along this whole line here, which is like the first thing we did where it opens up most of the sync fold there. And at this point, the finger or the flap that's facing downwards can pretty much be flat, which will let us then valley fold this last finger up, and actually needs to be on the other side of this other finger here. And it's just going to have this swivel / valley fold like that. And what we're left with is 5 fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, facing this way, and then 1 extra flap facing down. Right, so try to have something like this. I'll show it from a few angles so you can see. This is from like the top view. This is the side view where you can see how integrated this flap folded 90 degrees is. Now, if you're having trouble getting this to work, try to just remember and focus on this flap being 90 degrees and just push in the swivels. And don't worry if the fingers feel a little bit locked. As you push in on the swivel, it'll probably, be free, but you want to make sure you have 5 individual points for those fingers. All right, so we are almost done with this section. Next thing we're going to do is valley fold this backwards like this. So valley fold it so it faces down like that. So it's facing away from the fingers. You can unfold that. We're going to open up and outside reverse fold that flap like this. Now it's kind of like a point. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach in this pocket and kind of squash fold it. So it's a little bit tricky to show, but let me all right, so we have it like this. Now I'm going to open it up and kind of make a new mountain fold in the middle. So I can squash fold and squash fold it down. And it's not like exactly in half. So like don't worry too much if it's not exactly in half, right? I'll try to show, right? It's just like a squash fold. And this becomes like the palm of the hand, right? So we went from here. I guess if you really need to, you can pre-crease this. But we went from here to here, like that. And that is this hand. I know it's kind of a lot, but good job if you made it through that. Right, so we're done with the hand on the shield arm. And so let's just do the shield. Now the shield, it's pretty simple. This has confused a lot of people when they see the crease pattern. But as long as you start with it like this, all you really got to do is unwrap the outermost layer, right, like this. And, fold it down along this flap. And you'll see here we need to then do a swivel. So just a simple swivel like this. To, finish it off. And that's basically it. Now, to get it into its proper position, there's actually a lot of ways that this shield can now swivel. So I think generally you're going to want the corner to be facing the edge of the hand. If you look at how it's sitting on this one, the corner is basically pointed in the same direction as the hand. So what I like to do is, right now it's sitting pretty far back. I'm just going to grab this corner and swing it forward. And it can actually swing pretty far forward over here until it is facing the palm. And what's happening underneath is, some of the layers are kind of fanning out, almost like another kind of swivel fold, like this. And it doesn't matter too much like what the actual underside folds like. Just make sure it's, clean-ish in that direction. And then the remaining part of the arm, you just kind of translate that in as well. So now it's just matching whatever we did to push it forward. And that way it looks like the shield will actually protect the hand once we shape out all the fingers. So yeah, not too difficult, just maybe a little confusing if you were to only see the crease pattern. But that's how simple the shield is, and it's pretty much done. Next, we can keep going with some of the shaping. I think we can work on the helmet. So to start off the helmet, make sure that there are 3 flaps for the helmet above these 3 of these small flaps. And then obviously we have this big one up here, and then 1 down below. And what we're going to do is we're going to fold to the corner, but not all the way to the corner or to the center, corners to the center. If you notice on this one, right, it's not all the way to the center. There's a little bit of a gap, and I think it just makes the helmet look a little bit better if we leave a gap. So, kind of something like this, where there's just a tiny little gap. Something like that. Not too big of a gap, not too small of a gap. The most important thing is just to try to match the same thing on the other side. All right, I'm going to crease that and unfold. And the next thing we're going to do is fold the corners to the crease we just made. I'm going to do this side first this time. And then fold back up. I'm going to do that same thing on the other side. Let's fold to the crease and then fold up. You can see that's the start, or like the frame of the helmet. And then if your paper is kind of wobbly, don't forget that to help keep it in place, we had these mountain folds on the other side of the head. That can kind of help us keep the shape a little bit rounded. Right, there's like a little bit of wrinkle in the center of my face, so that's okay, but we're going to try to avoid that if possible. And that's just by manipulating some of these layers in the back. Like that. All right, so then we need the top of the helmet. And so we can start by just valley folding one of these down like this. And essentially what's going on here is the corners are folded at this angle, which it's like, I don't know, like a third of the 45 degree. There's not like too much reference, but I kind of just eyeball something like this, like that, and then just try to match it on the other side. And then I'm actually going to be folding these down under to hide them. Except for the top layer. The top layer, we want it to stick up. But basically, once I have one set of these, then I just try to match the next layer to be the same thing. Right, so I can kind of line them up. Like that. Except for the top one, which I am going to fold the other direction. Right, like that. And these ones, it's okay if it's like a little bit off just for style. Right, and then now we need to wrap it around the helmet. And basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm holding the neck in place so that I kind of have that bend going on in the back with these layers here, right? Those layers. And okay, I'm just going to adjust these layers here upwards so it's out of the way. All right, like this. And then I want to fold the helmet down, and it's going to be kind of like a crimp fold. So you can start to see where the tension is creating a crease on my helmet, right? And like you just want to eyeball. It's actually pretty small. I think people might make it too large on accident, but it should cover quite a bit of the face so the head is smaller, right? So kind of checking, maybe something like this. And then once I kind of have that in place, I'm going to use the back as tension to kind of keep it there. Right, so something like this. And actually, before we finish this off, let's do one more thing. Is I actually mountain fold the very tip of the mouth down, or of the mask down, the helmet. That way it can keep these in place. Now they shouldn't flop around as much anymore. But once we have something we like, which is like maybe around here, I'm going to do the same thing with the layer above it. And what happens is when I try to do the same thing with the layer above it, because the layers are thicker, it should lift a little bit above the next one like this and cause that like staggered helmet effect that we see. And then same thing with the last one up here. And this time our helmet folds up, so it's out of the way. And then what you saw me do just now is this long flap, kind of, you can, reverse fold it a little bit like this to get it out of the way, and just check the rest of our helmet to get it into a position that we like. So it might take you some time to get it to the right position, and it might not hold at first, but you just want to try to visualize, how much of the face to cover. So like ideally something like this for me. And then I'm going to very carefully just hold this in place. Fold this behind for now like that. And in the corners over here is where I'm going to add a lot of pressure so that the creases kind of stick. And it might not fully hold until we wet fold it, so it can just lock into shape here. But at least the rest of the face should be okay from here. So yeah, something like that. All right, now for this top part, you can see it's kind of like a weird double squash fold type thingy. So I think the way I did this is valley folding it up to the top. Something like this, where it's sticking up at the top. And then like right around here, I squash fold. Kind of like as close to like a kite shape as I can. And again, my only goal here is really to make both sides the same. And I'm not really worried about what's happening underneath, like it's kind of crossing underneath. But that way it just kind of holds itself in place in this manner. Right, and then you can see I give it like a little waviness. Kind of like that a little bit. Right, and then we have our helmet. It's not exactly the same as this one. I think I spent way more time getting this one better. So I think here, like I just need to raise this and pinch it a little bit harder. But we can worry about that with our wet folding tutorial. Just try to get like the general shape of your helmet. As you can see, even without methyl cellulose or water or glue or anything like that, it's holding itself up. There's a lot of tension kind of hanging onto the helmet in the back here, and that's just what we want to set up in order for the helmet to kind of stay put as we want it to. So yeah, just try to get it something like this, and then we can spend more time on it in the finished shaping. Right, so we're actually almost done with the full collapse. We're just going to fold a few more things to prep it for the shaping tutorial. So the first thing, let's take care of this flap right here. This is kind of a weird outlier flap you might notice. Is like, what's this doing here? We're going to turn this guy into the back. You know, since this model is pretty thin in the back, this is just adds like a small detail, but pretty easy to fold. So we're going to flip the model over. And what I'm going to do is unwrap around 2 or 3 layers. Let's just do 2 so it's even. So I'm opening 2 from this edge. I'm just unwrapping it out this way. And then I'm also opening it up on this end as well. And what's going to happen is there's going to be valley folds that form here and here. Once we start to collapse this again. So, right, just as I'm squeezing the flap closed, it's going to add those creases. And the reason we open the layers here is otherwise they're going to be stuck inside. So if you weren't sure how to open those and yours looks like it's stuck inside like that, just make sure those pop out. Right, and so the inside looks like that. And that way when we close the model, like this, right, we have this flap sticking out the back. And this flap is going to squash fold. So if you want, you can pre-crease, just fold the edge in half like that. All right, so I'm just pre-creasing it. And then the squash fold is going to happen in the center here. It's like right there, right? You can see the pre-crease. You're just gonna push that to start it. And it's gonna squash fold and try to get it along those pre-creases we made so it's even. Like that. And later in shaping, it's just going to cover the back like this. Now you'll notice it is still kind of tied to the sword arm, which that's just how it is, right? So that's all you really need to do for this guy. Now I think, let's see, the last thing we can do is, or maybe not the last thing we're going to do, but one thing we're surely going to do is work on the sword. So I'll teach this kind of sword. There's a lot of options you can do with this sword, but I'll at least show you how I did this one, which involves some squash folds over here. So we're going to squash fold this. This is just like what we did for the legs. So the spread sink, spread squash type thing. And since this is the sword, you know, you're definitely going to want to make this one pretty precise just because it's going to be seen. So I'm going to be careful on mine. My paper is actually like a little bit extra thin on the top because one of the layers fell off of the double tissue. That's okay. All right, just like that. And then you see this little corner. We're going to pull out this corner like this. Like that. Fold it down. All right. And we can close that back up for now. I don't know if we do the next one. We might do the next one, actually. It looks like we do a little bit. But I think what we're going to have to do to squash these is if you try, it's not really going to allow the full thing to squash, right? So I think these are actually just like half squashes. But we can try, yeah, I think it is a half squash. So instead of squash folding along this hinge, what we're going to do is we're going to fold this edge to the center line like this. And by doing so, you'll notice that two squashes want to fold at the same time. And so that's what we're going to fold. And these ones are definitely a lot smaller. Now the second one is a double spread squash. Just like this. And for now, we're going to close it up. I'll get to more of the detailed sword shaping in the next tutorial. And that's because the edge, how it's made is kind of different. Like this portion, you can see it's right here, but it's like unfolding around this stuff in order for it to be thin. And then we have this guy, which is right here. And this becomes a little spike from the way it's crimped. Same thing with the other side. So it's not necessarily a straightforward sword. It kind of like has a couple pleats that are involved, and yeah. But we'll get into that in the next tutorial. But for now, I think that's all the like real structural folds we need. You can close that back up. And I think the last thing for this tutorial we will do is for the fingers. So the fingers, there's a few ways to go about this. In previous tutorials, I would have you, pre-crease this angle bisector like this. And then open sync it on both sides. Now, I think what we can get away with is if you do this angle bisector on the fingers, just like we did before, but instead of like pre-creasing them on top of each other like I just did, right? We stick the pre-crease in between each layer like that. So we maintain the layer order. So for example, for the next one, I'm going to open the layer, then do the pre-crease, which this time it's not going to be a pre-crease, and close it up like this. And if we do that on both sides to all the fingers, we can actually spread out the fingers like we would have if we open synced it, but without having to open sync it. So it saves like a lot of time, and it's a little bit easier because the open syncs can get a little difficult on the other side. So we're going to try that out. Now you're going to do this, I think 4 or 5 times on each side. So I think, let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. And then on the 5th one, this one is just going to be that spread squash, right? The spread sync. So 4 valley folds, 1 spread sync. Spread sync / spread squash. And then now for the other side, we're going to do the same thing. So I have to unfold the sword a little bit just to get it out of the way. And in this case, because the sword is like in the way with this hinge, we can't get the full crease down. So we just go up until that hinge. It's not going to be a perfect bisector, but it still thins out the fingers enough for now, right? And do that same thing where instead of folding on top of each other, we are pre-creasing and maintaining the layer order. So it goes in that layer where it's opened. And then this one's the 3rd one. 4th one. This one we can fold as a bisector because it's not involved with the sword layers. And the last one, which is the 5th one. Actually, is this with the sword? Okay, maybe we just keep them all the same. Last one we're going to do is spread squash, but this spread squash, remember on the shield where we had to do like an off-centered one? It's going to be the same thing for this case where we have to do an off-centered squash because we have that other hinge in the way. Just like that. Close it up. And then we should just make sure our sword can still swivel, which it can. And you can see we've thinned out the fingers over here. And what I can do now is starting from the innermost one, I'm going to find that layer very carefully. There you go. Let's see if, let's have this zoomed if possible. Right? So that's the innermost one. And I can very gently pull it open, right? Like that. And this is going to be our thumb. So I'm just going to actually drag this one like 90 degrees very carefully. And there's going to be some craziness with the layers as we shift it down this far, but that's okay. And then as long as we pinch really hard and crease, right? Now we have that finger. And then we can do the next one. Same thing, just pull it out a little bit and then pinch where some new creases will have been added. And let's see, I think we have to do this 2 more times. This. And now the last one is going to be the thinnest layer, which is our pinky finger. And one mistake I see a lot of people do is they're going to like almost add this as like a reverse fold. So if I grab it carefully, right? They just kind of stick it out like really aggressively. So it adds this extra shape to a hand. But if you notice your hand, if you have your hand straight, let's refocus. Our pinky finger, even when we like open our hand like this, right? it's out a little bit, but most of our hand is still in line here. And if it's neutral, which we're grabbing a sword, it's in line with our wrist. So you want to make sure there's enough width with your fingers so that the pinky isn't like shifted out too far. So it can be out a little bit, but not too far. Ideally, it still kind of stays in line with the wrist. And often to allow that to happen, you just have to shift all the other fingers out a little bit, but that's looking pretty good, right? We have a little bit of an angle here, but not too much. So that is our hand, which is, again, pretty easy since we didn't have to actually do any sync folds. And I think it tends to look cleaner because sometimes those open sync folds can get messy. So yeah, there's that. That's pretty nice. And that is the collapse of the Sword and Shieldsman. Next tutorial will be all focused on shaping. So it'll be converting this into this final piece. And that's going to take quite a lot of time. So that's why I'm separating it into 2 different videos. But I hope you had fun folding and collapsing this guy. I think it's a pretty fun collapse, especially for only a 24 by 24 grid. But I hope you enjoy this. Stay tuned for the next tutorial. If you're watching this right when it comes out, that next tutorial will be there soon. If you're watching this in the future, go check out that shaping tutorial because I think you'll find it pretty fun. All right, everybody, that is the tutorial. I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.
All this origami, all this origami, all this origami got me going kamikaze now.